Thank you. And I want to thank Larry and Cheryl and Caleb and the Global Gift Fund for all that you have already done in Nigeria. I'd like to thank Susan, my wife, who is really the foundation of the work in Nigeria. She's the prayer warrior who helps to protect us as we go. Thank you. I was going to introduce you to my daughter, Elizabeth. However, now I get to ad-lib a little bit. We love you, honey, and we love Zach, too. And we are so, so happy. Yes. And he's got a job. Oh. You know, I'd like to introduce the rest of the Focus on Success team here tonight. Mark Miller, Bill Arthur, and Troy Crook. Guys, I want to thank you for keeping the doors open and the lights on over these last 13 years. Thank you very much. I can only imagine sometimes Mark driving home, you know, after I told him I'm going back, and he had to sit there and think, oh my God, is this guy lost it or what? I lost it a long time ago. I showed up without it, so it doesn't bother me. So how did two people who hardly ever let a hair get out of place end up in a nation like Nigeria? Well, you know, the short answer is God really, really has a sense of humor, which you're going to find out about in the next 15 minutes. But really, it was all Susan's idea. I mean, seriously, I would take a shower at halftime when we played the Cleveland Browns if I had dirt on my pants. Seriously. I would tell Susie, I'd say, honey, we can't go to Nigeria. Our hairspray won't hold. But we had met Evelyn and Desmond Cole during a church weekend retreat, and they were missionaries to West Africa, specifically Nigeria. They pastored to pastors. As we got to know each other on this weekend, Susan and I were amazed at these two, well into their 70s at this time, would go so far away for months at a time. We felt like, you know, maybe we should help them somehow. Like, you know, drive them to the airport or water their plants. Not go there. That's crazy, Sue. I don't like to get dirty, remember? Oh, and by the way, Susie, did I tell you about the bugs? They're on steroids in Nigeria. No, honey, I think, you know, let's just drive them to the airport or like water their plants or something like that. Sue would just look up at me and say, let's just pray about it, honey, and see what God says. Well, you know what happened. 6 months to the day, we're on an airplane to Nigeria for 17 days of helping the 70-year-old missionaries do what they do. Little did we know God had a plan. We fell in love with the pastors and their families. We grieved at the poverty and living conditions of the people. We couldn't believe the chaos or the resolve of the people. Let me tell you something. When a Nigerian mother wants to get to church with her family, rain, heat, mud, she hikes up her skirt, packing a baby on her back, tells the ones that are mobile to hop on and hold, and she hires a cycle, and off to church they go. We moved chairs, cleaned dishes, purified water, went to the markets, and listened to pastors tell of their fears and dreams. We preached, we didn't know we were going to, prayed for newborns and sick children when we didn't even know we were allowed to, stayed up all night just sweating because the electricity was non-existent. Susan and I were present with each other, sitting in the living room of a baking compound together, talking, sweating, laughing, crying, simply present with each other. No other, nothing. Just together in the moment. No cell coverage, no TV, no radio, just each other. Sound good? For the first time, I can remember being truly present. Nothing else on my mind because there was absolutely nothing I could do about it if there was. It was at this moment that I realized God was giving us something we hadn't been able to give to ourselves. Peace of mind. We were right where we were supposed to be, doing exactly what He wanted us to do, and He blessed us. Yes, He blessed us with something as simple as peace of mind, if only for a moment, yet knowing of its possibility for a lifetime. Something so simple yet unattainable until we agreed to do the outrageous. We followed His call. Susan and I went back the following year and continued to serve Evelyn and Desmond Cole and their care ministry to pastors. Of course, new trips present new challenges, many brought on by our own flesh. But in many respects, we learn more with the rose-colored glasses off about perseverance, toughness, and love, and the realities of life for most human beings on this earth. We learned why God cares for the poor and the marginalized. Life can be very hard, made even harder when we turn our backs on each other. We learned you don't have to be poor for life to get really hard. Torment isn't hindered by affluence. Soon after our second trip, Evelyn had a stroke while in Nigeria with another team. While the Nigerian medical community did all they could, they counseled the family that they should fly her to London, even though she was weak. Nigeria just didn't have the facilities to care for her. Little did we know she would never return to the land she loved since her youth. She did pull through from the stroke, but was never quite the same. And eventually she graduated to heaven in 2008. During these years after her stroke, Susan stayed back with Evelyn, and I took Desmond 4 more times. During these 4 years, we began relationships with over 500 Nigerian pastors and churches. While caring for Desmond in Nigeria and Susan with Evelyn in America, we began introducing American ministries to the pastors and the ministries of Nigeria. Matthew 25 Ministries collected hospital equipment, wheelchairs, and needed medical supplies and helped us send them by sea. Back-to-Back Ministries was involved in orphan care and had a team in Jos, Nigeria. And we started to support them. After Evelyn passed, Desmond was getting tired and didn't feel the same draw to go as when Evelyn was alive. You see, it was Evelyn's childhood dream to be a missionary to Africa. God put her with Desmond to complete that dream. So we took a 3-year break, allowing Desmond to sort out his feelings. During this time, Susan and I started a relationship with the Lored Ministries of Berlin, Ohio, Amish country. This is a group of business owners who ran their companies based on 40 principles from the book of Proverbs. It was also a connection with one of my former teammates from the 1976 National Championship Pit football team. Susan began to see a pattern to what God was doing. We were a bridge for all these ministries to work together. It was through these bridges that we learned of the children's plight in Nigeria, which brings us to the children in our camp today. What was initially a little over 200 children is today 1,350. We were contacted by Pastors Vasco and Solomon to pray with them for guidance on how to manage the tremendous needs of these children. The immediate things like clean water, ample food, clothing. Then the medical needs and psychological scarring. Perhaps we can start by telling Esther's story, pictured in the pink on that picture up there. Esther is 8 years old, from Borno State in northeast region of Nigeria. We had the humbling opportunity to interview her with 4 other children this past June at the camp in Benin City, some 600 miles from their home. Her story, though startling, is normal for the children in this camp. Esther and her mother were staying with her uncle, who had lost his arm earlier in life. Boko Haram attacked their village and home, brought Esther and her mother and uncle into the front room of their home, while the uncle was pleading for Boko Haram to let the women go. The attackers told the uncle to renounce his Christian God or die. The uncle said never, and the Boko Haram attackers shot him in the shoulder and then cut his only hand off as a form of intimidation to the others. Boko Haram kidnapped Esther and her mother and any other woman they could, and after pillaging the village and burning it down, they took the hostages to a jungle prison location. Esther's mother was repeatedly raped by the captors, and Esther was being prepared to be sold into the sex slave trade. Esther's mother knew there was very little time before Esther would be gone. Can you imagine if this was your daughter or granddaughter? One evening, during Muslim evening prayer, Esther's mother noticed a large log leaning up against the interior wall of the compound. So she brought Esther over to it and began to shimmy up the log, pushing Esther to the top of the compound wall. She then pushed Esther over the wall, shouting, "Run, Esther, run." That was the last time Esther has seen her mother. So Esther ran and ran and ran. Not knowing where she was, she finally came to a rocky area where she slept, tucked under a boulder. She wandered for several more days until she found a village and was rummaging through the compost pits for maggots to eat. One of the outreach pastors that we support gave her food and shelter. After learning what had happened to her, Esther was offered a sponsorship to travel to our children's camp in Benin City, where she is today, along with 1,350 other children with similar stories. In the camp, the children received moderate medical attention, donated clothing, and 2 portions of rice and beans a day, which is a real upgrade from the worms they were eating in the compost pits. All the food, medicine, clothing is donated by local churches, which is why we are focused on education. We never want to step in front of the local participation or blessing. Recently, due to some media coverage, the governor of Edo State's wife has been coming to the camp with food and support items. Also, just recently, the Oba of Benin, the chief of all chiefs, has sent 2 security personnel to watch over the children. When our director, Pastor Solomon, was summoned to the Oba's palace, the Oba wanted to know how we could bring so many refugees to his land without permission. Solomon showed our registration papers as a camp for the needy and said, "Your Excellency, what would you have us do?" Solomon said the Oba just looked away and walked out of the room. The next day, 2 security guards were on our property, and there is now a 24-hour detail watching over the children from the Oba's palace. Now that doesn't seem like much to us, but to have the Obas detailed on our property announces his blessing to all who enter. Only God could make this happen. We have also started receiving building supplies from the governor and his wife. They want to put roofs on the school buildings and add new space when they can. Once again, God's favor. What we know is that it is critical to keep the children engaged and on track with their education. It is very difficult to make it in Nigeria without a high school degree. There really isn't any program to catch up once you fall behind. With 160 million people, it's hard to reach back and pull people along. We have the infrastructure in place with 21 full-time teachers on the property. We've purchased all the necessary booklets, pens, paper, school fees, and are now building our library of textbooks. If we can keep the children on track for the next year or so, we can work towards a permanent solution. What we have is simply a refugee camp for these children, a real upgrade from wandering in the jungles of the Northeast. But we know the children want to go back home to Borno. In fact, while interviewing the older children, many expressed their interest in getting strengthened and educated so that they can go back as missionaries. What a testimony to the strength of their upbringing. However, we know we need to be very cautious as the sex trafficking cancer is a global disease, and we must take our time and only place children where monitoring services are in place. Well, this journey has proven to us that God is still in the miracle business. Every single one of these children is a miracle. They are God's kids living on holy ground. Look at all of the amazing works represented here tonight. Surely God is still in the miracle business. I look at my own life. 35 years ago, I drank my way out of the NFL. No more showers at halftime. 3 years later, I said yes to another outrageous proposal. A sober life, one day at a time. That was 32 years ago, for which I am eternally grateful. So you see, God is still in the miracle business. Well, our story started with an outrageous proposal. Mr. and Mrs. Clean go to Nigeria. So I'd like to offer us an outrageous proposal tonight. If just 75 of us are willing to contribute the equivalent of $100 a month, we can educate all of these children for over a year. 75 of us donating $1,200 will educate 1,350 of God's children for over a year. You see, the amount is not the outrageous part of the proposal. It's knowing that God is still in the miracle business, and we can become part of their miracle tonight. Thank you.